And hi, Maria, and hi, Joe. Okay, so I'm going to give you a very contemporary deal. It came through an email yesterday and this morning. First of all, our agent had a property listed, and the listing expired, and the agent and the seller agreed not to extend the listing. However, the agent had used the exclusion list, and we'll go look at that right now. So let me share. And we'll go to, actually, I don't want the RPA. I'm going to go to the listing agreement. Okay, so in the residential listing agreement, we've talked about this a number of times, but as you're filling this out, under compensation to brokers, there's one, if during the listing we get paid if we sell the property during the listing period, or two, if within, and then you can fill in the blank here, 60 calendar days after the end of the listing period or an extension thereof, the seller enters into a contract to sell, convey, lease, or otherwise transfer the property to any one prospective buyer or that person's related entity. And then the 1 and 2, they actually physically entered the property or shown the property during the listing period, or or for whom the buyer, broker, or any cooperating broker submitted a seller assigned written offer to acquire. But under these circumstances, the seller shall have no obligation to broker unless not later than the end of the listing period or any extension. The broker has given seller a written notice of the names of these prospective buyers. So that sets the scene. We had a listing. The listing expired on the day of the expiration. Our agent submitted a list, I think, of 4 individuals who would be called prospective buyers. And about 45 days down the road, one of those buyers came back and to our agent, and the agent wrote an offer for them and submitted it to the seller, and the seller accepted it. So the seller had signed a new listing with another broker. They told us that when our agent brought the offer, and he says, "Oh, by the way, I signed a listing with another broker," and he said, "Well, this is covered under our exclusion, in our listing under the exclusion period." And did you give the other broker the exclusion list? And the seller was kind of vague and didn't answer that. And so in this case, the agent called and said, "Well, I'm not sure that the seller gave the other broker the exclusion list. Shall I call the other broker and let them know about this?" And it's a rare circumstance when all that comes together. And so I talked to Vicky, and Vicky said, "No, that's not our job to call some other listing agent when we aren't even sure they're listing agent, because we don't have a copy of the listing. It's not in the MLS yet, even though the seller said he listed it. And it's the seller's responsibility to have delivered that." In fact, Vicky's instructions were, if you're in the situation, your listing expired, and you're going to have, that you have an exclusion period, and you supply a list of prospective buyers, you provide it to the seller with a cover letter and email that says, please provide this to any future broker you're working with, so that they were aware of the excluded prospective buyers and the exclusion period. So we proactively should tell the seller that at the time we're giving them the list of prospective buyers. But afterwards, when this has happened, Vicky said, no, it's not our job to contact the new listing agent. That's the seller's job. And if the seller ends up owing 2 commissions because they failed to tell that other broker about this exclusion, that's his problem. And so that's kind of where that was. Now, the thing that's happened recently, so they're in escrow, and they had 21 days to remove all contingencies. The 21st day came, or the 20th day came, the day before, which happened to be Wednesday. And the buyer removed all their inspection contingencies. But their loan was taking a little longer than they hoped. And they asked for a 10-day extension on the loan contingency, which seemed reasonable. It was still well within the closing period. Buyer maybe shouldn't have agreed to a 21-day loan and appraisal contingency anyway, because that's awfully short. We should speak to our lenders, or have our clients speak to their lender to ask, hey, what's a reasonable time to put in the contract for a contingency period on a loan and appraisal. I think the last time I did that, 30 days was a reasonable number. Anyone have any different experience with that?
I've had a couple of lenders that said they could release the loan early and just contingent upon the appraisal, and then have the appraisal later. So tighten it up a little bit. Yeah. Redwood Credit Union and Loan Depot both have done that recently. So trying to tighten it up a little.
How many days did you put in the contract for loan removal?
I think we did loan at 14 or 15. And then appraisal at 17, and we're on pins and needles about whether or not it's going to be back.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're happening more quickly than the last time I checked. So anyway, our agent sends this off to the contingency removal and the request for extension to the seller, and in a very positive way, saying good news, and we only need a 10-day, the buyer only needs a 10-day extension. We don't use the word we, remember. The buyer only needs a 10-day extension on the loan and appraisal, and it'll be good to go. Well, the seller wrote back and says, I don't want to give them extension. I want to give them a notice to perform. So now we fast forward to today. That happened yesterday. Now fast forward to today. So our agent sent the form, the notice to the NPB, the notice for buyer perform, to the seller last night. He completed it and sent it back, and the buyer, the agent sent it over to the buyer this morning. So the contingency expires today. So the question is today their deadline, or is 2 days from now, because today could expire without them moving, but they have a notice to perform within 2 days. So this paragraph 14E covers this. The notice to perform shall be in writing, be signed by the applicable seller, and give the party at least 2 days after delivery or until the time specified in the applicable paragraph, whichever occurs last. Well, the applicable paragraph was the paragraph that said it was 21 days. And this is 2 days beyond that. This will be, if they deliver it today, day one will be Saturday, day two, Sunday. He could cancel on Monday. So I don't know that it's going to help the buyer to have 2 additional days, but in a sense, even though the deadline is today, they have until Sunday to remove that contingency. So they're scrambling around in real time, trying to figure out whether they want to do that. A risk removing that contingency, and then the loan or the appraisal not coming through, things like that. And the question came up, they're still entitled to get a loan, right? Even if that's not a contingency in the transaction any longer. They still can get that loan. But the question comes up, is the seller, now that all contingencies are removed, is the seller obligated to let the appraiser on the property? Because the appraiser hasn't been there yet. So we go back to 12B under buyer's investigation. Seller shall make the property available for all buyer investigations. Buyer shall, as specified in paragraph 14B, complete the buyer investigation, either remove the contingency or cancel this agreement. And 2, give seller at no cost complete copies of reports and blah, 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 surviving intent. Okay. So there is, I'm not sure exactly sure where the exact language is, but and it may be here, because after they've removed all their investigations, does the seller still need to make the property available? I've heard cases where no, the seller just cuts off access to the property to the buyer after all the investigations are done. The buyer wants to send in their architect or the contractor or something like that, and the seller just says no, and they may have a valid case there. So my suggestion to the agent was, if they proceed and they need to get the appraiser on the property, there's a doctrine of good faith that underlies all the transaction, and I think it would be an act of bad faith not to let the appraiser on the property to do the appraisal. So they may have to fall back on some legal theory of operating in good faith to accomplish that, but I think they could accomplish it. And, let's see. Curtis asked, doesn't the new RPA cover that? I don't know that that language changed around that particular issue, but it may have to go back and revisit that paragraph. As soon as I'm done, Heather's going to get into the forms release summary that shows all the new documents coming out in December. It's 4 pages long, just the summary. And I think all of us will start spending time with the new RPA in this training on a weekly basis, getting used to the details of it. Okay. Oh, as long as I've got the RPA up, I wanted to cover one other part of the RPA. Go back to paragraph 14, because this came up last week. That effective cancellation on deposits. So it says that except as specified below, I'm reading down here about 4 sentences down, release of funds will require mutual signed release instruction, judicial decision, or arbitration award. If either party fails to execute mutual instructions to cancel the escrow, one party may make a written demand to the escrow holder for the deposit. So what's happened here is the buyer decided to cancel. The seller said, I don't want to give them the deposit back, and just went underground. So this was changed a while back. So either party fails to execute, so the seller is failing to execute the instructions, the buyer, one party, may make a written demand to the escrow holder for the deposit. And there's forms, buyer demand or the seller demand. The escrow holder, upon receipt, shall promptly deliver notice of the demand to the other party, to the seller. And if within 10 days after escrow holder's notice, the seller, in this case, does not object to the demand, escrow holder shall disperse the deposit to the party making the demand. So our buyer could get to the deposit. They may just have to go through those extra steps of notifying the escrow, making the demand to the escrow company and waiting 10 days. Any questions on that? Something in the chat, go ahead, Heather.
Well, I've kind of a related question. On the seller in possession form, they can set it up that a certain deposit will stay in escrow as a delivery of possession fee. And I have that come up.
You froze up on me, and I don't know if you froze up or I froze up. No, there you are.
Okay.
You're back.
Am I better now? Okay. So I had a buyer that wouldn't sign off on the release of the deposit because my sellers had said, well, we're going to get this leak or a thing repaired on the roof. It wasn't part of their request for repairs. It wasn't in any, it hadn't been, in my mind, officially attached to the agreement. We just ended up letting it go for now. But I'm just curious, in the future, is that a reason that they can hold on to the deposit, or?
This is the deposit in the SIP?
Yeah, so in the SIP, they put $3,000 to remain in escrow for delivery of possession. My clients moved out on time, everything, in great condition. But they had set up to have a small repair done to the roof, which the buyers actually delayed because they had people there. But they weren't releasing it until that repair was done. But it wasn't, in my mind, part of the agreement. It just, they said they were going to do it. So
yeah,
I don't know.
But they're willing to release it once the repair is done.
Yeah, which is actually happening. I'm just kind of curious for the future.
Yeah. Well, I think with any withholding of a deposit, particularly on a rental, or an SIP is a license to occupy, there has to be a good cause to withhold a deposit. I mean, even if you're a landlord, you have a security deposit, and you go in and there's no damage or anything, we'll do the walkthrough and everything's as it was, you have a hard time keeping a deposit. So I think they would run into trouble in the long run trying to keep that deposit for no valid reason.
Yeah. Okay. We didn't push it. I just was.
Yeah. Going to go on to the form. We're experiencing this in Lake County, where a brokerage has decided, in their wisdom, when they take a listing, to offer $1 in compensation to the cooperating agent, and not the typical 2.5%, 3% that we typically see in a listing. And they're using the excuse that this makes it transparent to the buyer what they're paying for actually in the commission, because the way things are set up now, always have been, we've had certain brokers and agents in the past say that they work for the buyer for free because the seller's paying for their commission. Well, that's not really accurate because the buyer is paying the seller and the seller's paying the commissions. So the buyer is actually paying the commissions. So they're using the excuse that, the buyer could get a lower tax basis and all kinds of different things. So the way we make sure we get paid in that circumstance, and we're having to use this with that when we write a offer on a listing that has less than the commission that we want to earn in the MLS offer, is a single party compensation agreement. So here we prepare this and identify the property, and then we say the amount of is negotiable, and the principal, who in this case is the seller, agrees to pay the broker, and that's the buyer's broker, and then we put in 2-3%. And then they identify, accepts an offer from Sally's client, and you'd have to name them, not just Sally's client, and within a certain time period. So you're going to make the offer today. You say, okay, we'll give it two weeks to negotiate this. So we're going to go a few weeks. Anyway, you put in a time frame. And then, it has a lot of other boilerplate in here. There's an agency relationship bit because we don't have a agency relationship with that seller. Unless we check one of these boxes, as we always do, that we will represent the principal, which is the seller exclusively. We'll represent both the buyer and the seller, or just represent the buyer exclusively. So it's the same kind of agency election as you would have in the RPA. And then it's signed off. Now, how do you, let's say you give this along with your RPA to the seller, and the seller says, oh, I like this offer, I'm going to accept it, but I don't like this compensation agreement, so I'm not going to accept that. So what keeps the seller from doing that? And the answer would be in the RPA and paragraph 6, where you have other terms, you would put subject, this offer is subject to the seller signing Form SP or single party compensation agreement attached to your chip. So that means they can't accept the RPA without accepting the SP. Okay, so that's how we're dealing with it right now up in Lake County when that comes up. Yeah, okay. Yeah, this is going to cover the new forms, as I said. Any questions on that item? All right. We had a couple things come up around the TDS in the last couple of weeks. So let's go look at the TDS. Transfer. Have the TDS in here. Oops. Let's see. Where are my forms? Oh. TBS. Oh, it's under real estate. Okay, gotcha. Sorry. They're in alphabetical order, and I thought it just said transfer disclosure statement.
Oh, it's real estate. I always
Yeah,
forget that
real
too. RETDS.
transfer. Right. Okay. And again, we've talked about this a number of times, but not the same people are on the call all the time, and we have people watching who may not have attended and things like that. So this has to do with paragraph 1, the coordination with other disclosure forms. Substitute disclosure. The following disclosures and other disclosures required by law, including the natural hazard disclosure statement that may include airport, blah, 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 have or will be made in connection with this real estate transfer and are intended to satisfy the disclosure obligations on this form where the subject matter is the same. So we always want to check one of these boxes. This has to be signed by the seller, so I can't do it. But this first one, inspection reports completed pursuant to the contract of sale or receipt for deposit. So that's the home run for our sellers, that any inspection report done either by them and given to the buyer or done by the buyer during the course of the transaction becomes part of the seller's disclosure. So what we had was a home inspection that the seller did between doing their own TDS and going into contract with the buyer. Okay, let's use a date. March 1st or September 1st, the seller signed the listing and did the TDS. September 15th, they got the home inspection done, and October 1st, the buyer came in with their offer. The home inspection indicated that there were problems with the ducting under the house, and it actually had photos of disconnected ducting in the heating system under the house. And this was given, the report was given to the buyer's agent and the buyer prior to them writing the contract. And in their contract, they wrote a non-contingent, no inspections, no contingent offer. And they signed off on all the reports that the seller gave them, including the home inspection. So our view is the seller disclosed that by giving them the report pursuant to this paragraph 1 in the TDS. The buyer's agent, came back after closing and said, hey, the seller didn't disclose the disconnected flues, ducting under the house, and they needed to pay for the repair. And they're arguing that because the report was not done by the buyer, or it was done prior to the going into contract, that this number 1 doesn't apply. Well, I think he's up the creek with no paddle on that one. I think it's pretty clear that any inspection report completed pursuant to the contract of sale or receipt for deposit. So this inspection report was done as part to be part of the contract of sale, and therefore, it was disclosed. So we're kind of arm wrestling with that right now, and we'll see where it goes. The second thing that happened with a TDS is that the seller did one when they listed the property 6 months ago. It didn't sell, went off the market. Now it's coming back up on the market. It's being relisted. And the question is, can we use the 6-month-old TDS? And the short answer is no. What we can do is to accept a letter signed by the seller saying, with reference to the TDS dated such and such 6 months ago, there are no changes to be made in the disclosures, and sign that. So they don't need to do a whole brand new one, but they do need to verify that there's no changes. And I just got one more thing, and then I'll let Heather go into the forms release thing, unless you have any questions. And this has to do with the RR. Request for repair. Okay. So in due course, the buyer did their inspections. They reached the date to remove their inspections, and as provided for in paragraph 14, they created a request for repair. And in this case, the request for repair was somewhat sizable. I think the transactions in the 800,000 range, and the request for repair was like 20,000. So it's a sizable number. And it was backed up by reports and inspections and blah, blah, blah. So the buyer gives this to the seller. And let's see, here the buyer requests down here, we've got $20,000 at close of escrow, blah, blah, blah. And a copy of the following inspection and other reports are attached. Now, so they attached, a bunch of reports. And this is the first time the seller has seen these reports. So seller's a busy person. Our agent delivers all this to the seller and on a Monday, and she says, oh, I got a really busy week. I won't have a chance to look at all this stuff till the weekend. I'll review all the reports and the request and give you an answer Sunday. Well, the buyer's agent gets all out of shape because, they're trying to move forward with the transaction, and now they got to wait a week for the seller to respond. The key point I wanted to get at here, I'll go back to the form, is that this form has no expiration date. It's a request. It's given to the seller, and then the seller makes this response. Either their choices are here under the response, but there's no reference here to any expiration date in the RR. So, what are the buyer's options? They can't give them notice to perform because there's no date by which they have to perform. I'll get to you in a second. The only question would be if they encroach on the closing date. That would be a date that you could give a notice to perform on the closing, a demand to close escrow. But if it's just tolling the inspection period until the contingency removal is approved, the seller is just letting that extension go on until he deals with it. So the buyer's kind of up the creek having to wait for that. Heather, you have a comment?
So I was just reviewing all the new forms coming out, and that is actually a change.
Okay.
They are making on the RR is adding an expiration date.
Okay, great.
I'm sure this has come up a lot. So yeah, so we won't need to deal with it soon.
Great. I had forgotten that was changed. And that was your question, Mari? You have a different question?
Yeah, but she answered that. But I have another question. Is there some class or whatever that's going to go through all of the changes and all of the ancillary documents? I've looked at the new RPA class. I've watched a seminar 3 times now, but I haven't got anything. I haven't seen anything covering all that other stuff, but it's interesting news. Yeah.
Well, Heather's going to go through that summary right now and see how much is covered in the summary.
Okay.
And then we'll go on from there and see if we need a class on some of these things.
Okay, great.
So let me make you a co-host to share your screen. Okay, we should be good to go.
Okay, great. Nobody has any other questions on the RR or anything that Gary was covering? Okay, well, I will pull up. So CAR released this list of, it's actually a pretty handy list. Maybe we should send it out to everyone because it is a summary of all of the forms that are being changed, renamed, updated, and it's got a quick blurb about what the changes are. So it is helpful to look through this. So, and I'm just going to cover kind of the main ones that I think you probably be most likely to encounter in the next couple months. So you have it in your mind.
Heather,
Oh, yeah.
Heather,
Yeah.
can you kind of expand that so yeah, I think if you push that little arrow button on the right side of the form, it'll get rid of the other part of the Adobe stuff.
Oh, let's see this. What button? I'm not sure
So
how to do that.
down below, you see a little right there, that one.
Ah, thank you. I couldn't figure out how to do that. Awesome. Okay, great. So yes, there you go. It's bigger. So anyways, I'll just cover those ones that I think you're most likely to encounter in the next couple of months, so that keep in your mind, if you're going to go to a form, at least you'll know that, oh yeah, there's been an update, and that, you know, it might be nice to even print out, or I highlighted the ones that I thought I'm going to be most likely to encounter. So, you know, to reread it, make sure that you're up to date on what's going on. The first whole section, the mainly first page, is all landlord tenant forms. So if you're dealing with that, there are quite a few here that have been updated. The main one, of course, that's coming out is the new purchase agreement, the new RPA. We've had that class on it, and a couple of things to note is a lot of the other purchase agreements, like the residential income purchase agreement, the commercial property and vacant land, new construction, all of those, they have changed over so that they're in the same format as the main RPA. So if you you'll really know that main RPA, then you're going to more easily be able to follow along if you are encountering, you know, if you're doing an offer on vacant land or new construction or anything else. Also, pretty significant is that there is no longer going to be a separate manufactured home purchase agreement or probate purchase agreement. Those are both now just going to be addendums to the regular RPA. So if you're doing a manufactured home or a probate, you're going to just use the regular RPA, and then there's a section you're going to check there that will add that required addendum on. So that's a pretty big change as well. So if you're hunting around trying to find that manufactured home or probate, it's not going to be there anymore. Use the RPA and then it'll come up. Let's see. These are mostly, you know, tenancy and common things that I don't encounter too often. They have revised the assignment of agreements. So if you have someone that's, you know, going in and assigning the purchase agreement, you'll want to take a close look at that. A lot of the changes are just because of the new RPA. So for instance, the cancellation of contract, release of deposit is being revised just to, you know, it's now the paragraphs it refers to are different. So it had to be revised so that it would correctly correlate with the new revised RPA. Same as with the contingency removal form. It also, I think this is kind of nice. It reflects how buyer's investigation contingency is actually in 3 parts. And so you could actually, you know, someone can just on there, you know, remove a piece of that, not the entire investigation contingency. The RLAS, the residential lease after sale, so the, you know, the seller in possession for over 30 days has been also revised, which makes it more similar to just a regular residential lease or month-to-month rental agreement. And then here's that request for repairs. I didn't know this, but the RR is they're gonna add that expiration period. And there's also going to be a new paragraph specifically for the FHA or VA required repairs. So if you have a request for repair and what you're asking for is required by that FHA or VA loan, then it's specifically going to be addressing that. And it also, you know, in the response to that, the RRR, it talks about how the FHA, those repairs, if it's FHA or VA, means if they don't accept it, then they may not be able to get their loan. So it's just kind of putting the seller on alert for that. The seller counter, I mean, really, so many of the forms we use all the time are being updated. The seller counter offer is also being updated, coordinating it with the RPA. But it's actually also including some terms like backup offer addendum and the SAP. It's putting back in terms that are often included in the seller counter offer and the seller multiple counter offer also. Definitely of note, the seller property questionnaire, the SPQ, is being reorganized. It looks different, so make sure you read over that before you send it off to a seller. They're making the first item talking about the seller reports and inspections, and it does give the advice for sellers to answer yes, no matter how long an item, how long ago an item has occurred. And I think it's kind of interesting. They're including vaping as well as smoking on the property. The times of, times are changing here. If you use that summary and multiple offers, that's also been updated. So it can include loan type and seller credit, which is really nice because it didn't have a spot for that. And the loan contingency piece on that was updated to from the prior 21 day to the 17-day default. They did change in the RPA some of those default time periods. So when you're looking at that, make sure you take a look. Otherwise, a few renamed forms and a few things that were discontinued mainly because they have been replaced by something else. So that's really it. Keep an eye out. Do you guys want me to send out this summary with these highlighted ones so you can kind of take a peek on it?
I'll, when we send out the recording, I'll include the link. I put it in the chat for any of you that want a copy of that from the chat. But I will, I'll make sure when we send out the recording of this, it includes that link. So we'll get that done. Yeah, do you know in that RR form with the expiration, what it says happens if that time period expires without a response?
I have not seen it yet.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming it's similar to other expirations, but I'm very curious. Yeah, it doesn't.
Then you could give a notice to perform, and I would imagine similar to the RPA provisions.
Yeah, it just says the RR will have an expiration period just like an offer. If the seller agrees to buyer request, buyer agrees to the removal of the investigation contingency.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, what if they don't? What if they ignore it?
Yeah. Right. Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah.
So taking note in the chat, I just printed this out for myself because we were talking about it in the chapter meeting yesterday, and someone said we're going to be referring to this quite a bit. when you go to use the form, just check against this form to see how it was revised, so you're totally familiar with it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good.
Gary, I don't see it in the chat. Am I missing something?
Let me see. I thought I put it in the chat. Should be down there at the bottom. Oh, I didn't send it. Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
There it is.
Yay, thank you. Okay.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So you can either click on this, it'll be live transfer there, and then save the link or print the document or whatever you want to do.
Okay.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Parmita, good to see you. How you doing? How you in that Petaluma office in?
I am, yes.
Good. Looking good.
Office. It's a little quiet, but it's looking good. It's getting there.
Except for the bathroom, I heard. That's a private joke. Okay, y'all. Let's see. Do we have session next week? I'm not sure.
I do have a question. I pressed the link and it's telling me I need a special request or something like that. The request page or document required here.
It's saying restricted access.
Yeah,
You need to log in. You need to log in to
Oh, I
see.
just read the red one. Okay, sorry. Never mind.
Yeah.
is that
Um,
really getting us anywhere? Because I'm still getting the restricted access thing after I log in.
All right, so how I found it was up in the search button on the homepage at CAR.
Yeah,
I put in the search, I put in 2021 forms, and it comes up right there.
okay.
All right, sorry. I'll make sure that link works before I send it out.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. We will have a final contract training next week. Assuming there's enough information, I'll let you know, and we'll have a sales meeting before, and that'll be the last for the end of the year.
Okay,
Thanks for everyone for attendance. And we'll have a good weekend.
okay, you too.
Take care.